The night smelled of rain and sorrow. Clouds crouched low over the village of Oru, their bellies heavy with thunder. In the center of the compound, a single fire flickered weakly beside a still body wrapped in white cloth. The villagers stood in a circle, faces glistening with the storm's sweat and fear. Mama Igioma, the healer who once cured the fevers that swept through Oru, now lay dead before them. Her daughter, Amara, knelt beside her mother's shrouded form, her palms trembling as she touched the lifeless shoulder. The earth was wet beneath her knees, and the wind tangled her braids as if trying to comfort her. She healed the chief's son, Amara whispered to no one in particular, her voice breaking. She saved him. But the villagers said nothing. They remembered how the chief's boy had convulsed and coughed blood after being treated, how the fever left his body but his mind never returned. They said Mama Igioma had stolen his spirit. They said the rain refused to fall properly ever since. Her potions were never clean, one old woman murmured under her breath. They smelled of grave soil, another hissed. She was no healer, said the eldest of the men, his voice heavy with finality. She was a witch. And witches birth witches. Amara's body trembled. She turned toward them, tears streaking through the dust on her cheeks. You watched her heal your children. You brought her your wounds, your dying. How can you say this? The eldest man spat into the fire. Because even healing has a price. The gods have chosen. Lightning struck her hut for a reason. As if summoned by his words, thunder rumbled through the sky. The villagers looked up nervously, and in that moment, lightning tore through the clouds, splitting the darkness in two. It struck the old healer's hut at the edge of the village, setting it ablaze. The flames rose high, orange and hungry. The people gasped and murmured that it was a sign. The curse must be buried, the elder declared. Both mother and daughter, before the storm brings ruin upon us all. A few men stepped forward. Amara scrambled to her feet, clutching her mother's body. No, she cried. Please, she did no wrong. But they pried her fingers loose, ignoring her screams. Her uncle, Nadazi, threw himself between them, arms wide. You will not touch my sister's child, he shouted. You have already shamed us enough. The elder's eyes turned cold. Then you will join them. The crowd surged, rough hands dragging both Nadazi and Amara toward the open graves already dug at the edge of the compound. The rain began to fall in earnest, cold and stinging. Mud clung to Amara's feet as she stumbled, clutching at the wet air, her lungs burning from screaming. Please, she begged the sky, if the gods are real, strike me instead. But the only answer was thunder. The men dropped her mother's wrapped body into the first grave with a dull thud. Amara tried to throw herself after it, but two strong arms held her back. You said she was cursed, she gasped. Then bury me and see if the curse dies with me. The elder gave a grim nod. So be it. They threw her in beside her mother. The rain pelted her skin like stones as shovels lifted wet earth. She clawed at the air, eyes wide, face streaked with mud. Please, she screamed. Mama, wake up. Mama. Her uncle shouted something, but a club silenced him. The crowd's chanting rose above the storm, words of cleansing, of separation from evil. The earth began to close around her, the scent of damp soil filling her nose and mouth. Her vision blurred. Through the sheets of rain, she saw faces lit by lightning, faces that once smiled at her when she fetched herbs for them, faces that now glared down in fear. The first shovel of dirt struck her chest. She coughed and gasped, spitting mud. Mama, she sobbed, reaching toward her mother's still hand beside her. Her mother's skin was cold, unyielding. Then another shovel of earth hit her face. The taste of soil filled her mouth. She blinked rapidly, choking, and for one terrible instant she locked eyes with the elder, the man who had declared her cursed. The lightning flashed again, and in its brief, blinding light, she saw her reflection in his eyes, wild, pleading, defiant. And then she smiled faintly through the mud, her teeth streaked brown. Because somewhere in the thunder's growl, she thought she heard her mother's voice whisper, "Don't be afraid, my child." The shovel struck again. Darkness thickened. The villagers stepped back as the last clods fell. The rain eased. Silence. Only the faintest echo of a girl's voice lingered beneath the storm, half prayer, half curse, until even that faded into the soaked earth as the elder turned to leave. Lightning lit the graves once more, and Amara's eyes, buried beneath the soil, were still open, staring straight at him. They buried Mama at dusk, when even the wind refused to sing. The villagers moved like shadows, shoveling red earth with trembling hands, afraid to meet one another's eyes. No one wanted to look at Adana, the girl who clung to her mother's cold body as if she could still pull life back into it. The elders had whispered that Mama's death was not natural. Her skin had turned gray before her final breath, and her lips had stained black, as though the earth had swallowed her from the inside. But when Adana cried for answers, her stepfather silenced her with a slap. The dead should stay dead, he said. When night fell, they carried both bodies, Mama's lifeless form and Adana's struggling one. Her stepfather's hand gripped her wrist like iron. She must follow her mother, he muttered. The others didn't argue. In their hearts, fear had already decided what was right. Adana screamed until her throat split. Her cries bounced off the baobab trees, but no one came. The villagers tied her beside her mother in the same grave pit, wrapping her wrists with vines. Her stepsister Nkiru watched in silence, her face calm, her eyes reflecting the moon. When Adana met her gaze, she saw no pity, only satisfaction. As the first spade of soil hit her chest, Adana begged. "Please, not here. She's cold, but I can still feel her." Her voice cracked, the sound desperate and raw. Her stepfather's voice thundered above. "If she wants her mother so badly, let her have her forever." The earth poured over them. Dirt filled Adana's mouth, her eyes, her hair. She tried to lift her head, but the weight kept pushing her down. Mama's hand was still beneath hers, limp, warm in memory only. The night animals went silent. Only the shuffle of feet and the final thud of the shovel remained. By the time the grave was covered, the stars had turned away. The villagers left quickly, as if the ground itself could reach for them. Silence returned, but not for long. Beneath the soil, Adana coughed weakly, her chest burning. She pressed her hand against Mama's body and whispered, "Wake up, please. I'm scared." Her voice broke. "Mama, don't leave me here." Then, something shifted. A faint sound. A low, rasping hum like a sigh carried through the dirt. It was her mother's voice. "Adana?" Her heart froze. "Mama?" The voice came again, clearer now, trembling like wind through leaves. "Don't cry, my child. Listen to me. You must not sleep." Adana bit her lip, choking back sobs. "I can't breathe, Mama." "Listen." The voice grew sharper, echoing in her skull. "The earth is not your end. There is something beneath it, something waiting." The soil around her seemed to vibrate. She felt movement beneath, like slow waves pushing upward. Her fingers brushed against something cold, bone or stone or both. It pulsed faintly with heat, as if alive. "Mama, what is this?" But her mother didn't answer. The hum faded, leaving only the steady heartbeat of the buried world. Adana felt her pulse sync with it, slow, deep, ancient. The fear in her chest began to twist into something else. Not calm. Not courage. Something darker. Her breath came shallow, then even slower, until it matched the rhythm beneath her. Her mother's voice returned, soft and breaking apart. "If they wanted to bury us, let them learn, the earth remembers." The words sank into Adana's bones. Outside, a cold wind passed through the village. Nkiru, lying in her bed, turned uneasily as a faint cry echoed from the graveyard. She told herself it was the wind. But the ground had begun to tremble, and one voice was still crying from under the earth. The night after the burial, the village dogs howled without pause. Even the crickets seemed to have forgotten their songs. The elders, wrapped in goatskin blankets, muttered prayers to ward off restless spirits. But far beyond the reach of their trembling fires, the earth was shifting. Underneath the mound of fresh soil, Adana stirred. Her lungs burned for air, her fingers scraping against the roughness of her mother's shroud. She couldn't tell if her mother's hand still held hers, or if it was only the memory of touch refusing to let go. Then came the whisper again, faint and wavering like a leaf trembling in a storm. "Push, my child, the earth knows your name." Adana's eyes flew open, though darkness was all she saw. Her nails tore against the dirt, her breath short and wild. She kicked, twisted, and clawed, each movement a scream against suffocation. Her mother's voice kept urging her forward, soft but commanding. "Don't fear the soil, Adana. It covers, but it also carries." Her body was shaking from exhaustion when her fingers finally brushed open air. The first gasp tore through her throat like fire. She clawed harder, breaking through the crust of the grave, dragging herself upward until moonlight painted her in silver and mud. She coughed up earth. Her skin was pale with dust, her lips bloodless, her hair tangled with roots. But she was alive. Barely. The wind cut cold against her wet skin. Behind her, the mound trembled, a whispering sound rising from below. Her mother's name slipped from her lips, broken and weak. "Mama?" Silence. Then, just as she began to crawl away, a second hand broke through the grave. It wasn't her mother's. This one was thinner, gray and trembling, its nails blackened like burnt wood. It reached for her ankle, then froze, fingers curling as though grasping for something invisible. Adana screamed and stumbled backward, falling onto the grass. Her heartbeat thundered. "Mama!" she cried again, but no answer came, only that strange whisper under the soil, now deeper, older, echoing with something not entirely human. "The earth remembers," the whisper said, but it was no longer her mother's voice. Adana crawled away, her body shaking, her breath coming in gasps. She stumbled toward the nearest tree, gripping its roots as if to remind herself she still belonged above ground. Her tears mixed with the dirt, forming streaks of mud across her face. When the dawn came, the village children found her sitting there, wild-eyed, silent, covered in soil up to her neck. They screamed and ran to tell their parents. By the time the elders arrived, Adana hadn't moved. Her eyes were open, but they didn't seem to see them. One of the elders, old Chief Udu, who had buried more people than anyone could count, waved a hand in front of her face. "Girl," he said gently, "how did you come out of the grave?" She didn't answer. Her lips trembled. When she finally spoke, her voice was strange, both hers and not hers, carrying an echo that made even the wind pause. She said, "The earth carries." The villagers crossed themselves, muttering. Chief Udu frowned. "Who said?" Adana turned her gaze toward the gravesite, her eyes glimmering unnaturally under the morning light. "My mother," she whispered. "But she didn't come with me." They followed her trembling hand toward the burial mound, and froze. The grave had split in two. One half was empty, where Adana had clawed her way out. The other half still held her mother's shape, but the soil above it was wet and dark, breathing softly as if something still moved beneath. The villagers fled. By midday word spread through the hills. The buried girl had returned, but the grave still whispered. Some said she was blessed. Others whispered she was a spirit sent to curse them all. Adana's stepfather didn't believe at first, until he saw her with his own eyes. He dropped the calabash he was holding, spilling palm wine across the ground. "You should be dead," he stammered. "I buried you myself." Adana's eyes glowed faintly as she looked at him. "You buried your hands in sin," she said. "Now wash them clean if you can." Her voice was calm, but the earth beneath their feet trembled. A small crack split the ground near the graveyard. The sound of a low, humming moan rose from below, like a mother calling from far away. That night, Adana dreamed of the grave again. She saw her mother sitting at the bottom of it, smiling faintly, her eyes glowing pale green. "You came back, my child," the mother said, "but not all of me stayed behind." When Adana woke, she found her hand covered in fine white dust, bone dust, though she hadn't gone near the grave. The villagers would no longer pass near the graveyard. Even in daylight, they claimed the air there was colder than any shadow, that the wind carried voices that did not belong to the living. Chickens refused to peck near the burial ground. The goats bleated and pulled away whenever her name was mentioned. Only Adana returned each dusk, barefoot and trembling, drawn by something that felt like blood calling to blood. She carried a small oil lamp as she walked between the graves. The flame shuddered though there was no wind. Every step she took sank into the damp soil, as if the earth knew her weight and memory. The mound where she'd been buried had changed. A faint hollow pulsed beneath it, like the slow beating of a buried heart. She knelt beside it, her fingers trembling. "Mama," she whispered, "if you can hear me?" The ground moved, soft at first, then rippling outward like water disturbed by breath. A faint light rose through the soil, pale and bluish. It gathered before her in the shape of a woman's face, her mother's face, made of dust and mist. Adana's heart leapt. "Mama?" The lips formed a smile that wasn't quite right. "My daughter," the voice sighed, its tone both tender and hollow, echoing as though spoken from deep underwater. "You came back as I asked." Adana's tears fell freely. "I tried to dig for you, Mama. I tried to bring you out, but—" Her mother's voice cut softly across her grief. "The earth doesn't let go so easily. Some of us belong beneath it." The words sank into Adana like cold rain. She reached out instinctively, and for a heartbeat her fingers met warmth, but it wasn't a living warmth. It was like touching breath that had turned to memory. "Why did they bury us alive?" Adana cried. "What curse did we bring?" Her mother's form flickered, the features twisting as though pain rippled through her. "They feared what they didn't understand. They feared my voice, the voice that could call the soil awake." Adana frowned, remembering the lullabies her mother had sung, songs that made roots tremble and lamps flicker. "You said those were old songs from our grandmothers." "Yes," the spirit whispered, songs of earth blood. Songs that feed the land, not men. But they wanted our tongues silent. The flame of Adana's lamp bent low as if bowing to something unseen. The graves around her began to hum faintly, a vibration she could feel in her chest. "Mama," she whispered, "I still hear you when I sleep." Her mother's ghost smiled faintly, and this time her teeth were dark with soil. "Then the earth still listens through you." Before Adana could ask more, a sudden noise broke the stillness, footsteps. She turned sharply to see two men standing at the edge of the graveyard, torches in hand. Her stepfather and one of the elders. "You again?" the elder hissed. "What devil work is this?" Adana stumbled backward, her lamp shaking. "I'm speaking to my mother." The stepfather spat on the ground. "You speak to nothing but your own madness. The dead do not answer." The torchlight hit the mound, and the ghostly face melted back into the earth, leaving only a shimmer of wet soil. Adana fell to her knees, clawing at it. "Mama, don't go." The elder grabbed her arm roughly. "If you bring spirits into this village, girl, we'll bind you with the same rope that failed the first time." Adana's body went still. Then slowly she turned her face toward him. Her eyes gleamed with a strange sheen, as if moonlight had entered them. "The rope failed because the earth refused," she said softly. "And if you try again, it will refuse you too." Her stepfather struck her across the face. "Enough of your curses." But before he could raise his hand again, the ground beneath him gave a low, hollow groan. The soil cracked open slightly, and a wisp of cold air escaped, smelling of brine and rot. Both men froze. What trick is this?" the elder stammered. The ground shuddered again, and from the grave came a sound like slow breathing. The stepfather dropped his torch, stumbling back. "By the gods!" The soil split wider, and for a moment, the shape of two hands pressed against it from below, then vanished. Adana could only whisper, "She's waking." Her stepfather ran. The elder followed, shouting for the others. Adana stayed, tears and mud streaking her face. "Mama," she whispered, "what do you want from me?" The answer came not as a voice but as a pulse through the ground, slow, rhythmic, alive. Her mother's presence coiled around her like warmth in the chill night. "To remember," the whisper finally came, faint as breath on a mirror. "To finish what I could not." Adana looked down at her hands. Dirt clung to her skin in strange lines, marks that shimmered faintly like buried light. They looked like veins, but they pulsed with something older than blood. The moon rose higher, and the wind changed direction, carrying the scent of wet clay and forgotten rain. From the distance she heard drums, funeral drums. But they weren't beating for her this time. As she turned to leave the graveyard, she noticed something behind her. Her mother's grave mound had flattened, perfectly smooth. But beside it, another mound had formed, smaller, fresh, still damp. And on top of that mound lay something shining faintly, her mother's beaded necklace, the one buried with her. It hadn't been there before. Adana bent slowly and picked it up. The beads were cold, heavy, and slick with what felt like tears. As she slipped them around her neck, a shiver passed through her body, a soundless hum like the earth exhaling. That night, Adana could not sleep. The air was heavy, thick as if the world itself were holding its breath. The beaded necklace her mother left her glowed faintly under the moonlight, the light shifting like ripples over water. Each time she closed her eyes, she heard faint murmurs rising from the ground beneath her mat, whispers she couldn't tell were inside her mind or under her floor. Outside, the wind had gone still. Even the crickets had fallen silent. It was the kind of silence that seemed to listen. Suddenly, a tremor ran through her hut. The calabash by her bed toppled over, spilling water that moved on its own, crawling across the floor toward her. She gasped and scrambled back, but the water followed, forming strange shapes that pulsed like a heartbeat. Then, from within it, she heard her mother's voice. "Child, the earth remembers." Adana froze. "Mama?" Her voice trembled, her fingers clutching the beads around her neck. The water rippled in response, the surface shaping into the faint outline of her mother's face. The features were soft but blurred, as if reflected through glass. "The rope that held us was tied by those who feared the old blood. They buried it, me and what I carried. Now it stirs again through you." "I don't understand," Adana whispered. "Why me?" Her mother's reflection smiled faintly. "Because you heard me when even the earth was deaf." Before Adana could answer, the door of the hut creaked open with a slow groan. A shadow filled the entrance, her stepfather. His eyes were wild, his breath heavy. He was holding a hoe, its edge sharp, freshly cleaned. "I told them you would curse us," he hissed. "And now look, the ground shakes when you walk." The goats refused to feed. You brought her ghost here, didn't you? Adana's heart pounded. She's not a ghost, she said, rising to her feet. She's my mother, and she only wants to be heard. He advanced, his voice growing louder, almost frantic. You think I'll let the dead take my home? You should have stayed buried. He swung the hoe down, but before it could strike, the ground beneath them convulsed. The floor split open with a roar that drowned his shout. Dust and light erupted upward, flinging him back. Adana staggered, clutching a post as her hut shuddered like it would collapse. Through the crack in the earth, a glow poured out, green and gold, like sunlight caught underwater. A deep hum filled the air, almost musical, almost alive. From that light rose whispers, hundreds of them, old and sorrowful, like women singing from beneath the soil. Adana stared, her breath trembling. Mama? The whispers merged into a single voice, her mother's, but stronger, richer, carrying something beyond human. They silenced the womb that fed this land, it said. They buried it beneath stone and shame. But life cannot be buried forever. The earth has heard our names again. The stepfather groaned, crawling backward. Witchcraft, he gasped. You've brought death. Adana looked at him, tears of fury and grief in her eyes. You brought it the day you buried us alive. The ground trembled once more, and this time the light took form. A figure rising from the split floor, half shadow, half earth, her mother's face made of clay and starlight. She looked both alive and not, her eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Adana, the spirit said softly, you must choose now. The blood that remembers or the silence that forgets. I don't know what that means, Adana cried. Tell me what to do. Her mother extended a hand made of soil and light. If you touch me, you'll never walk as they do again. You'll walk as the earth walks, through roots, through stone, through time. You'll be my voice. But once you choose, there's no returning. Adana looked at her trembling hands, at her stepfather who cowered near the door, at the necklace glowing against her skin. The whispers around her grew louder, chanting her name in old tongues she didn't know but somehow understood. She took one step forward. Then another. The spirit's face softened. Then let the earth speak through you, my daughter. Adana reached out, her fingers brushed her mother's hand, and the world exploded into sound. She felt the heartbeat of the earth thundering beneath her feet. She felt roots pushing through soil, rivers carving through rock, bones dissolving into earth. She could hear every buried name, every forgotten voice. The soil was alive, and it was speaking. The light around her grew so bright that her stepfather screamed and fled, blinded. Adana cried out as energy poured through her body, her skin glowing, veins burning like molten gold. The beads around her neck shattered, scattering into the air like stars. When the light dimmed, she was kneeling, trembling, but changed. Her hair shimmered like strands of night soil. Her eyes glowed faintly green. Wherever her tears fell, tiny flowers sprouted instantly. She whispered, Mama? But the spirit was gone. Only the whisper of wind answered, but it came from the ground, not the air. Outside, the villagers saw light bursting from her hut and gathered in fear. Some knelt, whispering prayers. Others fled to the hills, claiming the buried girl had become the earth's daughter. Inside, Adana stood slowly, her breath steady, her skin warm with the hum of living ground. She could still feel her mother, not beside her, but within. Each heartbeat carried an echo of another voice. And then came a sound, faint but clear, the soil behind her shifting again. She turned. The floor of the hut rippled, and something small and gray pushed its way through, a bone hand clutching a single flower. By dawn, the village was no longer still. Chickens refused to leave their coops. The trees along the edge of the river bent inward as if bowing toward something unseen. Even the ground beneath the huts seemed to breathe in slow, uneasy rhythms. Adana awoke sitting upright, her heart echoing to a rhythm she could no longer tell apart from the earth's pulse. The flower her mother's hand had left in her palm still bloomed, its petals pale, damp, and softly glowing. It smelled not of sweetness but of wet soil and lightning. When she stepped outside, dew shimmered strangely under her feet, forming tiny circles wherever she walked. The ground whispered faintly in her ears, tiny voices murmuring beneath the surface, a language older than words. Her neighbors saw her and froze. One woman dropped her basket. She's alive, someone whispered. But she shouldn't be. Adana didn't answer them. Her gaze turned toward the hills where the graves slept. From here she could see the faint steam rising from the burial ground, as if it too were waking up. By mid-morning the elders called a meeting in the square. The oldest of them, Chief Udu, sat hunched with his staff trembling in his hand. "That girl has brought the curse of the buried," he rasped. "First her mother's voice, now the ground moves beneath our feet." The stepfather stood beside him, his face pale and wet with sweat. "She brought it herself," he said. "I saw it." The earth opened in her hut. The ghost of her mother rose from the floor. Adana stood silently at the edge of the gathering, listening. The crowd's murmur swelled around her like buzzing flies. Finally she spoke, her voice steady but carrying a strange echo that made the air hum. "You call it a curse. But the curse began when you buried the living." The crowd went still. "Do you think the earth forgets?" she continued, stepping forward. "It keeps every secret, every scream, every breath stolen in the dark. My mother's blood fed your soil and now it answers." Her words made the ground beneath them vibrate. The villagers gasped as dust lifted from the earth in tiny spirals. The stepfather pointed at her. "You see? Witchcraft. She commands the ground like a demon." Adana turned her gaze toward him. "A demon?" Her eyes glowed faintly green. "Then what does that make the man who buried a child alive?" The murmurs grew louder, divided, half fearful, half curious. Chief Udu struck his staff against the earth. "Enough. If the girl carries the spirit of the dead, we must cleanse her. The gods must judge whether she belongs among us or below." Adana said nothing, but inside her chest something stirred, her mother's presence, warm and deep, speaking not in words but feelings. "They want to silence you again." That night, as the village prepared for her cleansing, Adana sat alone by the riverbank. The water reflected her face, but it was no longer entirely her own. Her reflection blinked a moment later than she did, and when it smiled, it showed her mother's eyes. "Why did you choose me?" Adana whispered to the reflection. The reflection tilted its head, and her mother's voice rose softly from the rippling water. "Because they buried my song. Now you are my echo." Adana bowed her head. "What if they kill me again?" The river's voice was calm. "Then you will rise again. The earth doesn't lose what belongs to it." Suddenly, a noise broke her trance, footsteps, quiet but hurried. She turned to see her stepfather creeping behind her, carrying a gourd filled with something that steamed faintly in the moonlight. He spoke without emotion. "They will not cleanse you, Adana. They will bury you again, deeper this time. But first I'll finish what I should have done." He lifted the gourd and the stench of hot oil filled the air. Adana's eyes widened as she realized what it was. "No," she breathed, backing away. But before he could pour it, the ground cracked open between them with a sharp snap. He stumbled, cursing, and the oil spilled, not on her but onto the soil. Instantly the ground hissed. Steam erupted, and the roots beneath the earth writhed like serpents. From the crack something rose, thin black vines twisting upward. They wrapped around his ankles, his legs, his waist. He screamed, swinging the empty gourd, but the vines tightened, dragging him down inch by inch. Adana watched, trembling, her tears falling silently. "Mama, stop," she whispered. "Please." The vines paused. Her stepfather gasped, half buried, his face pale with terror. "Help me." Adana knelt, reaching out her hand. "You buried my mother," she said softly, "but I am still her child." The vines loosened slightly as though awaiting her choice. The voice inside her heart spoke again. "Forgiveness feeds the soil, but justice strengthens it." She closed her eyes, feeling both her mother's pain and her own. Then she whispered, "Let him live with the earth's memory." The vines obeyed. They released him, but where they had touched, his skin turned gray, cracked like dry clay. He staggered away, sobbing, limping into the darkness. The next morning, the villagers found him wandering, his legs stiff as wood, his voice hoarse from crying. He told them, "The earth breathes through her. It remembers every wrong." From that day no one touched Adana again. The villagers began leaving offerings of milk and yam by her door. Children whispered songs about the girl who talked to roots, who woke the sleeping ground. But peace did not come. The graves behind the village began to shift. Sometimes at night, faint shapes of women could be seen standing between the tombstones, faces like Adana's mother, all looking toward the village. Adana started hearing them too. When she slept, their voices filled her dreams, calling, "Daughter of the buried, let us rise." Her mother's whisper came clearer than the rest. "The earth doesn't want one voice, my child. It wants all that were silenced." Adana awoke trembling, the flower by her bed now wilted and black. The beads she had once worn were gone, melted into her skin like small circles of light. Her veins glowed faintly under her arms, branching like roots. She stepped outside, feeling the hum of the ground beneath her feet. From the graveyard, the soil pulsed faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. She knew what was coming. The silence before a storm. The breath before the earth began to speak again. The villagers believe the haunting is over, the grave sealed, the curses buried with the two women. But on the seventh night, a child fetching water from the nearby stream hears something faint beneath the wind, a voice humming. Not crying this time, humming. A lullaby older than the village itself. The song seeps into their dreams, and by morning half the people claim they heard someone whispering their names through the earth. Deep beneath the soil, Naima's body lies cold beside her mother's remains. But her mind floats between death and memory, between silence and song. Her mother's spirit hovers near, dim as candlelight. She whispers, "You are not dead, my daughter. The earth swallowed your flesh but not your breath. It only borrowed you." Naima feels her chest tighten as though the soil itself is moving, pulsing like a heartbeat. Her fingers twitch. The roots wrapping around her arms seem to respond, alive, sentient. They pulse in rhythm with her breathing. She opens her mouth, but instead of air, a trembling sound escapes. The same lullaby her mother used to sing while pounding yam under the moonlight. Above ground, the villagers begin to panic. Chickens refuse to roost, dogs howl through the night, and strange cracks form in the burial mound. The elder men gather, muttering prayers, while the priest insists they must not disturb the grave. "The dead are restless only when wronged," he says. "Let them rest or they will not let us rest." But peace doesn't return. That night, the village well fills with muddy water that smells of blood and salt. When they try to draw it, the rope snaps and something like a whisper rises from the depths. "Mother." Inside the grave, Naima's senses grow sharper. She can smell the rain above, hear the insects crawling through the grass. Her vision flickers between life and spirit, between the red glow of her mother's fading soul and the dark, damp walls of earth. Her mother's voice grows fainter, urging her to move, to breathe, to rise. "Why?" Naima whispers weakly. "They buried us. They forgot us." "Not all," her mother murmurs. "The earth remembers. Blood remembers." Then Naima feels warmth near her chest, where her mother's bracelet lies. It burns softly, pulsing like a heartbeat. She grips it and feels a surge as if the soil itself is obeying her will. The roots around her loosen, curling back like fingers releasing a secret. A rush of air bursts through the cracks in the grave. Outside, the villagers awake to thunder and shaking ground. A scream rises from the burial ground, not in pain but in warning. The earth opens slightly and a hand, pale with clay, presses against the soil from within. It doesn't climb out, it only rests there, trembling, alive. The priest drops to his knees, trembling. It's her. The child. Her spirit won't rest. But in truth it is no spirit. It is Naima, alive between death and life, her voice echoing softly through the roots that bind her to the land. The next morning, mist covers the village like a shroud. No birds sing. No one dares to fetch water from the well that hums with Naima's lullaby. The priest sends young men to fill it with stones, but the sound grows louder, not fainter, as though the earth itself is singing. Mothers clutch their children. The elder women whisper that the song is not a curse but a cry, a child calling for justice. But no one speaks aloud whose name the cry calls most often, the stepmother's. In her hut, the stepmother sits awake, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. She hears Naima's song in her dreams, a soft, rhythmic tune that grows sharp whenever she closes her eyes. She tries to block her ears, but the melody plays in her bones. Each beat of her heart seems to whisper, "You buried me. You buried her." On the seventh dawn she can no longer bear it. She storms into the elder's hut. "Dig them out," she screams. "Let their ghosts go to rest." But the elder shakes his head. No spirit calls for rest with a song like that. That's the sound of someone still breathing. The stepmother freezes. Still breathing? A murmur ripples through the hut. The people remember the crack in the soil, the trembling hand, the voice that didn't fade. Suddenly the impossible seems real. By midday a crowd gathers at the graveyard, spades in hand. Rain begins to fall, soft and steady, as if the heavens themselves are watching. They dig carefully, afraid of what they might find, until the earth turns soft and wet, and a low hum rises from below. "Stop," the priest warns. She calls. Not for mercy, for witness. But curiosity outweighs fear. The stepmother pushes through the crowd, kneeling at the edge of the grave. "Naima," she cries, her voice trembling. "It's me, forgive me." For a moment, silence. Then, from deep within the soil, a faint voice answers, "Mother?" The villagers gasp. The stepmother's eyes widen. She begins to dig with her bare hands, desperate and shaking. Mud cakes her fingers as she claws at the dirt, calling Naima's name. But the deeper she digs, the colder it gets. The soil begins to pulse, faintly glowing blue. Suddenly, a tremor runs through the ground. The villagers stagger back as water seeps from the grave, dark and glimmering, not ordinary water but thick and shimmering like tears turned to light. It flows around the stepmother's knees, rising slowly. "Help me," she screams, but no one moves. The water climbs her waist, her chest, her throat. And from below, Naima's voice sings again, not weak but powerful. A song of pain and promise. "You buried me with lies, but truth has roots deeper than soil, deeper than fear." The stepmother's scream is swallowed by the sound of rushing water. The ground bubbles and then falls silent. When the villagers dare to look, the grave is no longer a mound, it's a small pool, calm and glimmering like a mirror. In its reflection they see a girl's face, Naima's, serene, glowing faintly through the water. Beside her, the faint outline of her mother's hand rests gently on her shoulder. The villagers kneel, trembling. The priest lowers his head. "The child was buried unjustly," he whispers. "Now the earth has made her its daughter." That night the pool does not dry. It hums softly with Naima's song, and the air smells of rain. Children are warned never to lie, never to harm the innocent, for the ground listens, and someday, it may choose to sing again. Seasons pass, but the pool where Naima once lay never dries. Even in the fiercest heat, its surface stays cool and shining, always humming faintly, a song that carries through the nights when the wind is still. People begin to visit from distant villages, bringing gifts and whispers. They call it, the grave that remembered. Those who come in guilt, thieves, liars, betrayers, leave trembling, saying the song grows louder around them, echoing their sins back in voices they recognize. Those who come in sorrow, the lost, the broken, say they feel a calm warmth as if unseen hands comfort them. But the stepmother's name is never spoken again. Her hut remains empty, the doorway swallowed by vines. Children say on moonless nights, they hear splashing footsteps near the pool, and a woman's voice begging for forgiveness that never comes. Naima's song becomes legend. Mothers sing it to lull crying babies, priests hum it during burials, and old men claim the tune keeps the soil soft, so the dead may rest gently. But no one truly forgets that the song was once born of pain, a cry from beneath the earth. 1 year later, during the harvest season, the ground around the pool begins to bloom with wild lilies. Their petals shimmer faintly blue under moonlight, and wherever the petals fall, crops grow twice as strong. The villagers call it a blessing and they guard the pool as sacred ground. Yet one night, a storm gathers, fierce, with winds that bend trees and lightning that claws the sky. The rain lashes like tears, and the pool churns violently, glowing brighter than ever before. The villagers run from their huts and gather, watching in awe and terror. Then from the storm a sound rises, a voice layered within thunder and wind. "You buried me beside my mother. But I was never alone." The earth trembles. From the glowing pool, ripples expand outward, spreading through the fields, through the roots, through the wells. Water bursts from the ground in every direction, flooding paths, soaking huts. Yet not one person is harmed. The flood carries only what is rotten, spoiled grain, broken tools, rusted metal, washing the village clean. When the storm finally ends, the people fall to their knees. The pool is calm once more, but something new glimmers at its center. A shape of pure light, faintly human, resting where Naima's grave once lay. The villagers whisper her name and the light flickers as if in answer. The priest approaches slowly, voice trembling. "Naima, daughter of the earth, keeper of truth, may your spirit rest." But the air responds not with silence, but with a whisper like wind through reeds. "I rest when justice roots, not when songs fade." The priest lowers his head and the villagers bow. From that night onward, the pool becomes a shrine, not to the dead, but to truth that refuses to be buried. Travelers carve its legend into stones, passing it across kingdoms. Beware the soil that remembers. For when lies rot beneath it, the earth will make them sing. Years later, the village thrives like never before. The soil is rich, the air sweet, and every harvest is bountiful. Strangers who pass through feel a strange peace settle in their hearts, though none can explain why the wind here always hums like a child's lullaby. They say the well water tastes faintly of salt and sorrow, but those who drink it sleep without nightmares. In the center of the village, the pool that once marked Naima's grave remains perfectly clear, reflecting every cloud, every bird, every face that dares to look into it. Children are told, Don't lie near the pool, it hears truth better than your mother. And when thunder rolls in the distance, the elders murmur that Naima is listening, reminding the earth to stay kind only to the just. On certain nights, when the moon is full and pale as a widow's face, the song rises again. Soft at first, a whisper like someone breathing through the soil, then swelling into a voice. It's the same lullaby Naima's mother once sang, but now layered with other tones. Deep, eternal, echoing through rock and water. It feels like the voice of the land itself. Some say it is Naima still watching, guiding crops, guarding the innocent. Others swear it is her mother holding her child's spirit close beneath the roots. But the oldest among them know, it is both. Two voices woven into one, neither gone, neither forgotten. And when travelers stop to rest by the pool, they sometimes see small ripples dancing even when there's no wind. If they listen closely, they might hear words within the water. I was buried in silence, but silence could not keep me. I cried once for justice, now I sing for memory. No one dares to disturb the pool anymore. Instead, each year on the day the storm first came, the villagers gather around it with candles made from sea wax. They place them gently on the water's surface and watch as they float, hundreds of tiny lights drifting like souls at peace. The flames never flicker no matter how the wind blows. The villagers take this as a sign that the earth is still listening. When the last candle fades and the night grows still, the people bow and whisper, "May truth always find its voice." And somewhere deep beneath their feet, the soil hums softly in reply. Final haunting echo. Sometimes, in distant villages, when a child hums alone at night, the melody drifts through the window and over the fields, the same tune, the same rhythm. And those who hear it say the ground seems to breathe as if remembering. Then from far away, a whisper follows the wind, gentle, sorrowful, unending. I was buried but I did not die. I only learned how to sing beneath the earth.